Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm joined this afternoon by Sachin Rajah. Sach, how you doing?
Good, James. Good. Good to be here.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you back. We recorded what we thought was going to be quite a dry podcast late last year, all about GA4, and it turned out to be one of the more popular pods of the entire year. So we thought we'd test the audience's patience by discussing privacy and cookies for 2024 to see if we can strike lightning twice, Sach.
A lot of people will surprise you out there, James. They love data.
Only not as much as yourself. So we were chatting before we hit record, and it is it feels we're recording this pod in late Feb 2024, and it feels after many years of probably not worrying too much about it, like marketers, non-technical marketers are starting to kind of go, okay, what's the story here? We've hearing a lot about moving to a cookieless world. There's talk of Google Chrome turning cookies off on a small subset of browsers. So I think it'd be good, Sach, just to talk about, I guess, like what you're hearing from Rocket clients and what you're having your team do to, I guess, just in the short term, have our clients and our clients' teams ready for the changes that are coming.
Yeah, I mean, privacy is going to be a big topic in 2024 that we just simply kind of ignore. Unfortunately, just like GA4 last year. But the good news is the market is that all these changes are actually behind the scenes and little updates. So there isn't a great deal that will change in the day-to-day like there was GA4. But in terms of like what we're seeing at Rocket, definitely customers who are impacted by EU traffic that you advertise onto EU, there is a need to kind of act quite immediately with regulations coming into play in March 2024.
Okay.
Whereas within Australia, we're seeing we've got a little bit more of a leeway looking at Q3, Q4 of this year to be compliant.
Cool. And so what are those practical things we are doing? Like, we've been working with clients since the beginning of the year, I guess, just updating certain elements of Google accounts, Facebook accounts, I think those things that would be suggesting to listeners of the pod to be doing if they haven't done.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, what we've done is we've done an audit of our clients to understand where they're getting their traffic from. And because EU has been the first mover shift to more comprehensive privacy regulations, we've made sure that we've prioritized any client who has majority or a good portion of their traffic coming from EU to ensure that we go ahead with implementation of Google Consent Mode and other privacy technology that needs to be implemented across Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth.
Yeah. And so I guess we're talking here Google Consent Mode and then the Facebook CAPI, CAPI changes. So the two big ones.
Those are the two big ones. And LinkedIn's coming out with that as well. You might have also heard about Google Enhanced Conversions as well. So Google Ads has its own tech stack for this as well.
And what do marketers need to do?
That's what marketers need to do. So you have to work with your website administrator, be a developer, perhaps even your marketing team, to first assess whether you are getting that traffic from EU. And if you are, you need to act immediately. And what you need to do is install Google Consent Mode by Google Tag Manager. Yes, it gets getting a bit technical here.
No, that's okay. I think it's good to know just the top level of what does need to be done. So it's within Google Tag Manager.
Yeah, so just within Google Tag Manager, what you're having to do, you're having to link Google Tag Manager with something called a consent management platform. Now, you may not know what this is, but I'm sure a lot of us have seen this. When you visit a website and you see a small pop-up that says accept or decline cookies or privacy, that is the consent plugin that Google is going to require from March onwards. So it's the installation of that plugin, the setup of Consent Mode within Google Tag Manager, and then the test on the implementation on your live site.
So the sentiment being the EU, like a lot of this stuff has basically pushed it, saying these things have to be done. The tech platforms have responded in kind with this setup. And does it feel fair to say that even though, the majority of listeners to the pod, their websites, in all likelihood aren't having majority of traffic from the EU, but you kind of have to do it because we're having our hands forced by Google and Facebook. If we don't do it, what are the kind of downsides?
Yeah, and that is the big question with not a lot of information online about the impact on what this would have specifically in the local market in Australia. But Google has given us hints about what to expect. So I remember I was talking earlier about GDPR. We do see Australia eventually moving to replicate something similar in relation to the restrictions that GDPR has in Europe. And Google has acted on that, and that's why we're seeing the removal of cookies from Google Chrome in Q3 and Q4 of this year. And when we get to that stage, I believe that Google is going to make it mandatory to have consent mode installed in Australia as well.
Yeah. And it is that. So I think from a technical viewpoint, it's important for marketers to integrate those setups as we've touched on. And then I think from a how does this actually impact me as a marketer, it's the move to the cookieless world, which I think has the most question marks around it. To give some background, basically Google came out late last year. I mean, they've been talking about moving cookieless for many years, but essentially came out and said that they would take cookies out of 1% of Chrome browsers worldwide, starting from January 1 this year. That's now happened. And there's a really good article in MI3, which is mi-3.com.au, which is dated 13 Feb 2024, which talks about, it's a really good, interesting article looking at both locally and globally kind of what's happening since that's occurred. And the idea, and it's got an interesting push and pull there where Google has done it. Data suggesting that CPMs for that subset of users has dropped 30% because obviously less information is now being known about those users because cookies can't be placed. Third-party cookies can't be placed. And there's actually a lot of pushback from a lot of ad tech providers around the world actually not wanting to kind of fast track that move to being cookieless because I guess those changes, the technical changes we're making in some ways will then give Google probably better insight into users' behavior and therefore allow us as marketers to target those users. That I guess if you're relying on third-party cookies and buying audience data through programmatic, would that be fair, Saj?
That's right. And to point out, that is with users scratch for consent into the information being captured by Google. Then you've got a subset of users who will just completely opt out, and Google's going to lose that capability of having information about that segment of users.
Do those users, when you say users, do you mean end users to a website, or are you talking about people using Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics? And
no, so end users to a website.
Yeah. So those users, if they hit no to cookies and tracking, obviously we won't know for retargeting purposes that they've been to that website, and we won't know for contextual targeting that they've been to an automobile website if you're a car manufacturer trying to target. Will they themselves have a less, this is not a good question. Where should I go next? Questioning Saj?
I'd say, like, what impact does this have on personalized and targeting?
Yeah, okay. So I think that the big question for marketers, and the ones I guess we're getting, Saj, is more around, okay, cool, I understand there's these shifting kind of sands around privacy and tech between Google, the European Union, and all these things I can't control. And I guess questions we're getting are, will I still be able to remarket afterwards? Will I still be able to feed my database in and match with users? If I'm a car manufacturer, will I be able to target people in market for buying a car? And I guess they're the things that we're getting asked. And like, what will actually happen out there?
There's a couple of things. So the first one that you touched on, personalized ad targeting. For those users who just simply don't opt in, they don't provide consent. When you're advertising with potential audience, the target ads make sure. So marketers may see their reach being reduced. Targeting could be less precise. Because with the granular consent options that are now provided to users, we may not be able to collect a whole bunch of information that we were previously used to collect about them before. And then what I will see what I can see happening with this is there's going to be an increased reliance on contextual targeting and content targeting. So with contextual targeting, that's effectively relying on content of a website. So if I'm on an automated website, Google will know that and it can serve ads based on that contextual information. And custom intent targeting, we're using first party data here. Go to Google, I type in, buy a Honda, and Google will know that I'm in the market to buy a Honda.
Yeah, it's interesting. We recorded a pod probably about a month ago now with our MD David, talking about the importance of first party data, and I guess just how these changes is just one of the reasons as to why first party data has become more and more critical. But it definitely is just another kind of reason as to why first party data has to be taken so seriously. And in that MI3 piece, it was really interesting that they were kind of saying that in their research, often the more top end of town brands, bigger budgets, bigger brands, had invested much more significantly in first party data, ID solutions, customer data platforms to actually ready themselves for this change. And it does really reinforce the importance of taking data seriously, because it is going to be more difficult to do. Not that we could do one-to-one remarketing and retargeting, but that kind of one to very close proximity, where it feels that these changes are going to have users based, I think like a lot of the Google word is flock, and it's kind of more about looking at users that behave in a particular way or are interested in a certain product or service or habit or trait, and we'll be probably marketing more in those types of areas rather than in this kind of much more precise, you've been to my website, now 6 days later, you're going to kind of get a certain message.
I think it's a really important point to emphasize here, because once the time legislation comes into effect in your region, you simply won't be able to retarget to users who don't provide you consent. And there's no way around that, even if they're logged in, with the Google account or their Meta account, you still cannot retarget to them. So yeah, that's why first party data is really, very important, because then you have the ability to reach your prospective users, your existing users, and even your lapsed users as well.
Yeah, interesting. And at the moment, the push by a lot of the kind of like non-Google ad tech providers and platforms, they're actually saying slow down. We don't want Google to fast track the rollout of going cookieless this year. And they're kind of putting a position paper forward in the UK to have the government stop it on kind of competition grounds. And I think the feeling there being is that because Google is implementing and adopting this system themselves, because they have this incredible touch point with users through Chrome and through Maps and YouTube and whatever else, is that if you're a marketer or an advertiser that has previously relied on third-party data, so kind of if you're buying programmatically and you're buying audience types programmatically, it's kind of there where this change is likely to have quite a large impact in the short to medium term. That the initial look at how that 1% of Chrome users that has been moved cookieless in the first 6 weeks of the year was suggesting that CPMs in that segment had dropped 30%. And I presume that's because there isn't the granular level of targeting of those users like we have had to date. And kind of feels to me such a little bit like the iOS 14 changes a few years back, where impacted certain clients more than others within Facebook, and it had basically everything to do with the audience targeting, of those clients within Facebook. And doesn't mean that social media has become kind of a debunk way of advertising, but it just means that its effectiveness will change for certain businesses, and some will come out ahead and some will come out behind. What more can we talk about, Sach?
Conversion tracking is also really important. So what impact this will have on, your conversion data in April.
Yeah, cool. And Sach, I guess another element to this is how the changes are going to impact tracking, measurement, and conversions? Like, what are you seeing there, and any advice for marketers out there to prepare?
Well, so when this does come into effect, unfortunately, we will see conversion data impacted, specifically for those users who do not provide consent. But this is where Google Consent Mode comes in. So when a user does opt out, what Consent Mode will do is that it will actually use AI to model that user's behavior and activity to then predict conversions to appear in your GA4. Now, it won't be 100% accurate, and you may even find larger discrepancies between, your GA4 and your internal CRM. So I do want to flag that. But in this, where I feel the feedback loop is really important here. So when you're working with those who manage your digital ad platforms, it's really important to feedback that data to them to let them know what's actually working, what's not working, and compare the discrepancies between what they're seeing and what you're seeing.
It's a really, really good point. Sach, I reckon that is perfect in terms of the level of detail that we needed to go into today. If you want more information on Google Consent Mode, Facebook CAPI, we published an article on the Rocket website, so rocketagency.com.au in the blog, which goes into a lot of detail about the changes and what you need to do. So feel free to jump to that. I think the MI3 article I referenced is just really good at, if you're looking at it more from a targeting what's going to happen by the back end of the year, ad tech, programmatic versus buying within Google. That gives you probably the opposite end of the spectrum, just in terms of how it might impact you. But other than that, Sach, unless you've got anything else you want to cover, I think that's a really useful pod.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good. And just to recap, I really do see this year, 2024, just being that big election point when it comes to privacy. So, and make sure we do take it seriously.
Perfect. Thanks, Sach.
Thanks, James.